Good morning, how are you? Great, I'm so glad to be here with you today. I'd like to just get a feel to who's in the room. How many small business owners do we have? Great. And how many individuals do we have that work for agencies that support small businesses and others? Great. And thank you all for all that you all do as well. When I talked to Don and he said, I'd like for you to talk about failure is not an option. That's something that's near and dear to my heart. But even just taking a step back, how many of you all have been through things in the past year? Anybody? Kind of rhetorical question these days, right? How many of you all felt like giving up? Okay, it's good we have some people who never felt like giving up in this room. I'll raise my hand way high. There have been many days that I feel like giving up. And that's something that most of us, or all of us, at one point or time or another have been through. And that's but when we think about it, when you feel like giving up, what keeps you going? Have you ever thought about that or reflected back? Sometimes we're just glad to get out of that place before it comes back. But what keeps you going? And that's a question that we can all ask ourselves and even look back. That's very important. Do any of you all know what keeps you going? Have you ever thought about it? And I see one yes here. But I'm going to tell you that's real important. Because that's your foundation, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. What is your foundation? When we say failure is not an option, and we know that's been a military term, and something I've adopted and we talk about in our company as well. But I'm going to also flip that. We're going to talk about failure is not an option, but a new tagline we've adopted in our company this year is dare to be amazing. And those really go hand in hand. Because when failure comes or is right in front of us, what do we do? And what I like to do is just kind of talk about, a few key foundational principles. And as a matter of fact, even though it's a room of us here, I like to even make it like a fireside chat, as if we're just talking one-on-one. And I want to really share, from me and inside of me as well. And I'm sure there's many things that we can all relate and connect on as well. I want to touch on and talk about 5 basic things. The first one is when I look at building that foundation. Because at times when we're all down, it'd be good to have someone pull us up I'm dating myself because I'm telling baby boomer, but good to have someone pull you up by your own bootstraps. And sometimes you don't have anyone, so you pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And that's that foundation I'm talking about. What do you do? And I was thinking, what do I do? Sometimes we just do it and not think about it. But even right now, begin to think about it. Because all of you all are overcomers. And there's one thing to be unconsciously competent. But when you can become consciously competent, that's where you want to be. Because that means it's like if you're going somewhere, you can drive yourself, but you can't tell anybody else where to get there, how to get there with the directions. That's unconsciously competent. But when you can say, make a right here, left, right, even if the streets change or there's construction, at least you have a foundation that you know some detours. But if you don't even have that foundation, what are you going to do? A lot of us, or we can be lucky, but that's where that target comes in. How do you become bullseye? And that's where we look at, even at our company. We call ourselves the CMI team because we are a team. Each time you get stronger and better, and that's the key. But going to those foundations, principles, one I'll start off with, and I have some questions for you. One is, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? Have you ever thought about that? And that's very important to think about. As a matter of fact, that's the first foundation. And when I say what kind of legacy do you want to leave as you look at yourself, and that's a question I ask myself, and even ask myself even more so these days, as we're looking and as repositioning and where do we want to be. All of us have been affected one way or the other. That's what's happened in our country. But that's a good time to evaluate. Where do you want to be? And even it goes back to what we tell kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And that legacy is the foundation. As a matter of fact, as I begin to think about that for myself and answer that, first of all, your legacy has to be bigger than yourself. And dare to dream big. Dare to dream big. As a matter of fact, it's been a number of years ago, even before we began to do the federal contract that we do. I was with a girl one time in a conference, and she was like, well, what would you like to do in 5 or 10 years? And she had shared hers, and I said, I'd like to touch the nation. And she said, okay, so what would you like to do? I said, I'd like to touch the nation. And you know what? That was in here. I recently heard, I was at a conference, someone had the acronym said, be MAD, M-A-D. And she says, MAD stands for making a difference. What is that burning desire that you want to do? And it could be on your job or not. But where do you want to leave a legacy? Because that's your foundation to get you through the day when things get hard and they're tough. And you can do that. And touching lives or connecting, many of you are connecting, or just giving back or encouraging. My mother herself has her own mission statement. Every day she would get up and say, Lord, help me make a difference in the lives of others. Now that's broad, but you know what? She achieves that mission every day. If it's in the grocery store or wherever she goes, and people do remember her. But think about that. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? What do you want to be remembered for? And even as our company grows, I think about small, as a small business owner as well. Of course, we have those of us who just want to have lifestyle businesses to make a difference and do some things to maintain. We might have some people working for us. And then we have some of us who want to be entrepreneurs, to grow and do things. Both are good, but just know what kind of legacy do you want to leave in your business, on your jobs, in your personal life. But when you have that foundation, that's one of those foundations. And we think about, as kids, when we hear those, the stories, even like the 3 pigs, because when the wind comes and blows, not if, when it comes, and when it comes again, and again, and again, what is your foundation to stand? So that's one. Think about what kind of legacy you'd like to leave. The other thing is, know who you are and who you inspire to be. And that's close to the legacy. Because like me, I said, I want to make a difference in our country, in our nation. And then later on I said, you know what, I like connecting. When I look back in my life, a lot of times, those are the things I've done all my life. Connecting. I've also loved working with grassroots and communicating and putting people together. And it's like, you know what? I see that common pattern. And a lot of times that could be something we could do for money or not. But sometimes when it's so easy, we as humans think, if it's easy, it can't be worth something. But most times, when it comes that easy, that's your God-given gift. And that means, and that's why I work with my team as well, I said, we try to pinpoint. If that's your area of passion and what you're good at, I tell them, and I'm stats and facts as a marketing researcher, you'll be able to do it twice as fast or twice as efficient in half the time. And that's how I can identify with my team where their gifts and their passions are. The flip side is if someone's working on something and it's taking them twice as long and they're half as effective, I'm like, we got to move them somewhere else. But use that as your litmus test as well. Where are you in what you do? And even you might be somewhere not there, but still be the best you can and still with that legacy of knowing and dreaming and even weaving that in. I can remember when I first started off, I was a scientist at Mary Kay Cosmetics for 10 years. And so all I've ever done was be a science work at Mary Kay Cosmetics, and a business owner. So those are my 2 careers in life. And I have my bachelor's in psychology, my master's in human development. So always into people and things. But even as I worked at Mary Kay, I had that passion to give back to the American Cancer Society, to build new programs and to do things. And even starting off young, and a lot of times when you start off, you have a lot of zeal, not as much knowledge as you need, or wisdom. But my outlet was the American Cancer Society. And I gave and worked that and with all my heart, because that was my passion. I could do it twice the impact with half the time. And from there, building in teams and people from there, and our biggest project was when, years ago, when there weren't mammography areas in the communities. And so we actually organized some of the first community efforts to take it out and encourage the community to come out. And those are the kind of things I did in my spare time. But a lot of times we have to be careful for, that's when you say, I don't have the time. But those are the very things that will energize you as well. So think about that. Some of you all are in a great place and you're just right there to move in what you're doing on your jobs or in the community. And even if you're not, find those outlets. But know your legacy, but also look at what you aspire to be. And one thing too, especially with us entrepreneurs, we look at it and we work to hold on to it, to make all of it happen. And one of a nugget of wisdom and truth I got is recently says, you know what we need to do is focus on the beginning and the end. And that middle part we cannot control. How many of y'all have experienced that? And it's like a tsunami that'll bring you down, and we learn it'll get done, maybe not quite the way I would have done it or the order, but if we have that vision at the beginning and we know the end, then that's what's important to get there. Another thing too is you look at knowing what you aspire to be, then that's when the vision comes. How many of y'all have a vision? Good, everybody has a vision. And with that is, and what I'd encourage you to is, with that vision, hold on to it, but look back at your foundation. Do you know the legacy, that long term? And then do you know the short term, what you aspire to be? Evaluate those as you strengthen to go forward with your vision, because when you have that, and how many of you all know sometimes it's a lonely place when you have that vision. You may not be able to share with anyone or a few people, and you can't even see it. But when you have it in there burning, and you know that legacy, as a matter of fact, even looking at the federal contract work that we're doing, and at this point, I just had a vision. Remember I told you my vision was just to make a difference in the nation. And I backed up at that time. And I just knew that I wanted to aspire to work and do some contracting. So, and so many agencies around have been so wonderful to help me. And I'd learned from the SBA and everyone, and then I said, you know what, I'm gonna start looking at federal contracting. And at that time, the federal contracting for my area we researched was in Washington, D.C. So everyone says, well, you know what, you need to go find a lobbyist or someone. And I said, who can lobby better for me than me? Who can sell my vision better than me? So you know what I did? Just start making trips to DC. I met someone and found some basic events to go to, begin to talk to someone, and I love learning. I know you've got to have many wise counsels. And as I begun to learn, and as a matter of fact, HUD was one of our first agencies, and Department of Transportation we started to work with. And even looking at that, the vision and just all of that, the legacy, had gone to one event because, as a matter of fact, we actually submitted for an opportunity, but before that happened, I just knew I was destined. And that's my next thing. I just say all the time these phrases. Know what you're destined to do. And that's the way I say it. I knew I was destined to work in DC. So with that, failure was not an option. It was just going to happen. I just didn't know when. So I had a number and I was calling, and the person never answered the phone. So finally, I sent my information, did all of that. So this day I said, you know what? I'm going to keep calling a day until I get someone. I'm going to leave one message. And I kept calling. And I can remember one day I was leaving one meeting, going to another. I was talking to my mother in between. And at that time, I said, oh, I need to go make a phone call. I called again, didn't get an answer, I hung up. So I got home that evening, and where I was going, it was like around 3:30 in the day, 4:30 DC Eastern time. I said, let me call again. Somebody answered. And when the gentleman answered, I said my little spiel and everything, it wasn't my spiel that sold him. It was that drive. And I told him, he said, you know what? I'm going to send you a statement of work. We have an opportunity that's coming out that might be a good fit. I said, okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity. He said, no, it was your persistence that got you to this point. So what I learned is he did have caller ID. But see, it was okay to work through because I knew my destiny. Didn't want to be rude, but pressing through. From there, we were the chosen ones for the opportunity, but for different reasons, they chose not to put us in the place. So after that failure, you still pick yourself up. And the key thing is, how do you keep from being bitter? It's not fair. But the thing is, talking to him, what happened and how can I get stronger? And as a matter of fact, that was back 5 years ago. And even though we didn't get that opportunity, a year later, that gentleman called me with an opportunity. And also, too, is the program person, and how many of you all know, especially in federal contracting, it's hard to get to that program person. He and I are now good friends. So every so often I'll call him and we'll come out and sit on the bench and we'll talk about marketing research and talk about trends. So even though I didn't get that opportunity, it planted that seed. But you gotta have that vision and to know what you're destined to do for that relationship to come about. Because now it's the relationship that's in place that's even more important than that other contract at that time. And the same thing can happen over and over again. But I think too is once you, as I mentioned, having that vision and know what you're destined to do. And I use that word very strongly. And even being transparent right now and looking at some things we're doing right now, I just knew that I'm destined to do some things internationally now. Destined to work with USAID. Have I begun to move forward with those relationships? Yes. As a matter of fact, I'm in DC once or twice a month. And, but with that, why do you think people listen? Because they can see that passion. Who would you go with? Who would you choose? Someone who had a passion when you can look in their eyes? Or someone who says, I just want to do a deal and a business? And that's why those foundations are so important. That's also the foundation you need to press through against all odds. As a matter of fact, and I told you, I'm destined to do some things internationally. And I know most of you, or everyone in this room, you all know the secret. You give and plant seeds to get. And so with that, knowing that I'm destined to work internationally, the opportunity came a few weeks ago for me to work with some Afghanistan and Rwandan women who are here as a mentor and for a plan. And so it was a wonderful opportunity. And I went to give, but I got a lot more than I gave. And established some really neat relationships and heard some really neat stories of strength. As a matter of fact, developed some new sisterhoods as well. And so that was about 3 weeks ago. the program and the ladies have an intense time here over 3 weeks. So they were coming back here to Dallas, and it was a 2-day event on Monday and Tuesday. And I went Monday, was good, and we talked. I said, I'll see you Tuesday. And then, unfortunately, a major tragedy happened. My father passed just this past Tuesday, which of course I was not there that day. But you know, with my mother, and we were doing everything and just exhausted, and I was like, I understand, but something inside me says, I'm going to their graduation. I've got to be at their graduation. And just so tired, I had a friend call and said, can you just drive me down there? And when I got there, I was so excited to see them graduate. But also when you press through with things like that, that's when the magic happens. How many of you all have seen that happen? You all know what I'm saying. Well, the magic that happened was, guess who? All of the people who were there. As a matter of fact, I got to meet the First Lady of the Ambassador of Afghanistan, who was there. And we got to visit and exchange cards and talk about what I could do to help her and the ladies. Got to meet the ambassador-elect of Rwanda, a lot of other fine people who are doing research in DC. And my question is, how can I help? But see, I listened to that. It was something inside of me, and at first it was going like I couldn't get through, but sometimes it takes everything we have to press through. And I know you all know what I'm talking about. Those obstacles are there. They're not gonna stop, but it's right on the other side. And those obstacles that are right in front of you right now, today, don't stop. Don't stop. Know your legacy. Know what you're gonna do and what you're built to do. And keep your eye on that vision. And that's when the magic happens as well. And I think what's also so important is those are the stories you've got to pull on. I challenge each of you all today is pull on your past victories. What were those victories? And that's when you know your legacy, then it'll start making sense. That's when you become consciously competent. Because see, not only that story I could pull on, but I had other stories to pull on. My husband says, you don't need to go. Everybody says, you don't need to go. But I knew inside something I'd had to get there. But you have to have your foundation in front of you and pull on your old stories to give you your strength. And I encourage you where you are now, each of you all, pull on your strength, because right on the other side is where that victory lies. As a matter of fact, one of my stories I could pull on even with that last week was right before we broke into HUD, U.S. Housing, Urban Development. I'd gone to a conference, and you go on that gut and everything. And so we went, and of course we all want to do matchmaking, couldn't get in matchmaking in DC. But I saw this guy, and I said, he looks like someone I think I need to know. And when I met with him, he was the gentleman who worked for the small business for HUD, who was conducting the matchmaking. So we had a nice little conversation. And so he just told me, come by my office. But to make a long story short, I learned from him, did what I needed to, and in 6 months, when everything looked vague or grim, someone told me to call the chief officer, procurement officer. And that's when I got him on the phone, said my little spiel, and he says, can you be here in 11 minutes? He said, can you be here at 4 o'clock today? This was 11 o'clock, and we were like at least 30 to 45 minutes away. I said, yes. And we got there, got cleaned up, we were all ready, the girl who was with me. And before I could ask him, why did you agree to see me? Because just the day before, someone said it was impossible to even see the people who work with them. And he said, because you used the acronym, PIH, that means you knew us. But all of those other steps of not giving up and applying made a difference. So to leave with encouragement, where you are today, each of you all, focus on that legacy, the long term, the short term. Don't give up, and you're probably closer than you think. Glad to be with you.